In this video, I'm going to take you through the 7 ways you can turn your riffs into full songs. Riffs, whilst associated with the electric guitar, can be played on any instrument. They combine elements of melody, harmony and rhythm that are repeated to stick in listeners' minds and produce powerful songs. Welcome in. My name is Matt, and on this channel I create videos that help people to write their first songs. A big problem lots of wannabe songwriters have is taking initial ideas or riffs and turning them into full-blown songs. But this is much easier to do than you might think. So let's start with the first way to do this, which is to power up. In order to fill out the rest of your song, you're going to need some chords. But what chords should you use and in what order? The easiest way to start, which requires no music theory knowledge, is just to try out each note of the riff as the root of a power chord. To explore this, let me introduce you to my example riff. Throughout the video, I'll use this to demonstrate each technique. I wanted to create a really simple riff that a beginner guitarist could play, so I just worked on some ideas using the A minor pentatonic scale. This is primarily in first position, which is probably the first thing you will practice when learning to solo. It's the basis of loads of rock riffs and solos. Here's how the riff sounds, with the tab on screen if you want to play along. Now I'll take the first tip and use each of the riff notes as the root note of a power chord. To begin, I'll try out the same rhythm as the riff, changing power chords as the notes of the riff change. Rhythmic elements are critical to riffs, so feel free to use them throughout your songs with chord changes and other song parts. This can provide a subtle DNA or thread that runs through your song and makes it feel more cohesive. Here's how that could sound. I don't think I'd use the whole thing, but I like the feel of the final 2 bars played with power chords. I'll add a couple of other power chords derived from the riff to break this up after 2 repeats, before repeating it again. Here's how that could look. The next question is, how can this be worked into a full song? This takes us nicely onto the second way to turn your riffs into songs. Number 2, embrace structure. If you only use one tip from today, it should be this one. By using tried and tested song structures, you have an instant framework to fit your riff into. This will get you most of the way towards a complete song and allow you to focus on what needs finishing. This means that you complete more songs, and by completing more songs, you'll become a better songwriter. If you're new to this, then the best approach is to keep it simple. I discussed the simple riff I created earlier, so now I'll plug it into a really simple song structure. This is riff, verse, chorus, bridge or solo, chorus times 2, riff. This structure allows for multiple repeats of the riff, whilst minimising the additional writing that is required to complete the song. This is even easier if you reuse the riff for the verse in a simplified way. For example, you could strip back all the other instruments and just get the bass to play the riff, or take out additional brief notes and articulations and reduce the riff to a skeleton. Here's how that could sound using my example riff and power chord selection from the previous section. I'm just going to play the riff, verse and chorus so you can get an idea of this approach. So far, I've not delved into music theory to develop the song, and the next tip doesn't require any theory knowledge either, showing you how easy it can be to write songs. Number 3, let your riffs brew. Most songs are built on a single musical idea accompanied by a few variations. This is where developing some really simple changes to your initial riff can be enough to finish writing a whole song. For example, look at the song Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes. What does everyone remember about this song? It's the riff, which has become universally recognised, to the point that it is chanted in football stadiums around the world. The whole song is just the riff and variations upon it. It starts with the riff played an octave down using a pitch shift guitar pedal. You can think of this like the riff in its simplest form, stripped back to basics. This serves as the intro and plays during what could be described as the verse, the only section with a vocal melody. Then two chords act as a pre-chorus of sorts, leading to a chorus-type section which just utilises the riff again, this time in a more aggressive, distorted manner. This is a bit like the structure discussed in the previous section, writing through with variations on an initial riff idea. So without any additional notes, you can vary up your riff with effects and play style. Let's go back to the example riff now to explore this. The intro and verse will remain the same, but this time I'll steal the Seven Nation Army idea and play a couple of power chords as a pre-chorus before playing a more aggressive version of the riff as a chorus. Here's how that could sound. You could also brew up some deeper variations on your riff. Go back to your initial source of inspiration and just add one or two notes to see if something fits. Again, this part of the process is not about consciously working things out and is just about simple experimentation. Here are a couple of basic variations on the initial riff that add a few notes. Listen for the difference this brings. Now let's further expand the choice of notes. Number 4, put your riff on the scales. So far I've been using an instinctive process to develop a riff and related song, and as you're aware, this can allow you to complete a song quite easily. But now it's time to be more intentional and use some theory to help us. The first thing to do is work out what notes are in your riff. If you've composed the riff on the guitar and aren't familiar with the notes on the fretboard, you might need to look them up. So the original version of the example riff has the notes A, E, D, G and C. I wrote this using the A minor pentatonic scale, so this doesn't come as a surprise. But what if you wrote this without any scales in mind? And what other scales do these notes feature in? There are many plugins, apps and websites that can help with this task. I'm going to use the website on screen. I'll link it in the description below as well. You can see that I've got a range of options for potential scales. This gives you a whole palette of notes to choose from, to shape and colour your song or alter your riff with. I'm going to keep this simple, and because my riff starts on the A note, I'm going to stick to scales with an A tonic note. That means they start with an A note and are therefore named after this. You don't have to treat the first or lowest note in your riff like this. There are no rules here. The two scales that interest me are the A blues/A pentatonic blues scales. They add a single note to the 5 notes I've been using, D#/E flat. This blue note adds a dissonant edge, which is essential to the blues sound. Listen to it in this revised version of the original riff. Now you've got different scale options for developing your riffs, it's time to think about some more chord options. Number 5, the key to the city. Closely related to the previous step is to work out what key you want your song to be in. The key of a song relates to the notes of a scale that it uses, and therefore what chords feature diatonically. That just means chords which are built using only scale notes. You saw in the previous section that the original riff could be in several different keys. Songs are typically written in the major or natural minor key, so I'll start by narrowing it down to those options to keep things simple. I'm going to use some new chords for the chorus section, allowing it to contrast with the riff. C major is probably the easiest key to understand, using all the white keys on the piano, so I'm going to use that to begin with. The C major key has 7 chords in it. These are C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and B diminished. You're free to use any of these chords, but to make life easier, you can just start with a common chord progression. I've created a guide with 6 popular major key chord progressions that you can use straight away. Head to majorkeychords.com and download your free copy today. Link is also in the description. I'm going to use the 4th example to build a chord progression around. It will use the rhythm from the end of the riff again, as you saw earlier. I'll use the first 3 chords twice in a loop, before going to A minor and ending on C to provide a major anchor. This contrast between the minor pentatonic harmony of the riff and the major harmony of the chorus is a pleasing idea that has been used in many songs. For example, Robert Plant's Tie-Dye on the Highway and Leveller's Hope Street use similar ideas. You could also increase this contrast by playing the minor blues riff version from earlier, as this contains a note that is not found in the C major key. Here's how that could sound. You can also look for chord ideas within the riff itself. Parts of the riff are often sequential and contain notes from chords played as arpeggios. That means the notes of a chord played one after the other. You can use the website I linked earlier, which has a chord finder, to try this out. For example, the first 3 notes in the original riff are A, E and D. These are the notes in the A sus4 chord. In bar 1, these notes are followed by the G note. A, E, D and G are the notes in the A7 sus4 chord. So bar 1 could be described as an A7 sus4 chord and bar 2 as an A sus4 chord. Bar 3 just contains the notes A and C, and bar 4 A and G. These could spell out a number of chords, as there are only 2 notes in each. In the next example, I'm going to use this idea to create chords for the verse. I'll just play 1 chord per bar that follow the riff notes. I've chosen A minor for bar 3 and C6 for bar 4. These have the riff notes in them, but also allow some ambiguity about the key. It could be C major or A minor. Here's how the song sounds using this idea for the verse. So far I've had a separation between riff and chords, but what happens if you want to bring them together? Number 6. Harmonise your riff. If you play chords whilst the riff plays, then you are harmonising it. This means that you are hearing a new selection of notes, which provide a different feel to the song. You can think of each moment of a song like a big chord, which all of the instruments and voices are contributing to. If you pause at any time and look at all of the notes being heard, then you can work out what chord is being played. But this isn't required, and you can simply use some of the previous tips to have a go at this. The most harmonious chords to use are, unsurprisingly, those which contain the riff notes. Luckily, this is something I showed you in the previous section. So all I'm going to do in the next example is play the verse chords from the last version of the song and play the riff at the same time. You've got lots of options as to what instrument plays the riff and how you arrange things. I'll keep the guitar playing the chords and allow the bass to play the riff. Here's how that sounds. You can also use chords from one of the keys you revealed by looking at the notes in the riff earlier. You could do this as before and play one chord per bar. But what if you want something a little more interesting? You can look to the notes in your riff that stand out. Change chords when these notes are played and it will highlight the importance of them and can add real drama. It also brings in some of the riff rhythm to link the riff and the harmony. For example, in the original riff I think that the first note A stands out in bar 1, along with the highest note G. All I'm going to do is take chords with the same root note from the C major key and play them with these notes. I'll do the same in bar 2 but change from A minor to C. Then I'll play a bar of F major and a bar of G major. This could be written as 6-5, 6-1, 4-5. Here's how that sounds with the bass playing the riff again. Bass notes often imply the harmony above them and are important for driving a song forward. So in the next example, I'll play the riff on guitar and use the bass notes to reharmonise. You could use any notes from the relevant scale, but to keep things simple and provide a point of comparison, I'll just play the root notes of the chords from the previous example. I'll change notes at the same rate that the chords change, but add just a little rhythm for interest. Here's how this sounds. Now you've considered many different elements of harmony, it's time to move on to the melody. Number 7. Think about the tune. Be careful with trying to sing a melody over a riff. A busy riff can distract from the vocals, and it can be difficult to work out what melody to sing over it. For this reason, as a beginner, I'd recommend contrasting the riff with chord-based song sections to sing over. Many vocalists will just sing the notes and rhythms of the riff to make this easier. There's nothing wrong with this approach. But what if you want to try out something different? Another technique is to fit your melody into the gaps in the riff. This isn't always possible, but often a riff will have some natural breaks in it which you can fill with melodic or vocal lines. For example, here's a simple melody using notes from the C major scale. It's played on the piano in an almost call and response way with the riff, being heard over the gaps and longer notes in the riff. You've got a full song now, but what if you want something in a different style? Well, the next section will help you. Bonus section. It's not just about rock. I mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but riffs don't have to be played on distorted guitars in a rock style. They can be played on any instrument and in any genre of music. For example, Think about Tracy Chapman's iconic 1988 song Fast Car. Despite being a mainly acoustic, reflective song, it is built around an instantly recognisable riff. It varies the riff being used in the verse with full chords for the more upbeat chorus section. With this in mind, I'm going to present a more relaxed, lingering version of the song. It will use more sus chords and seventh chords, as well as a gentle piano backing to give the song a completely different feel. Here's how that could sound. I have to admit at this point that you might have just wasted your time. The thing is, everything I just told you is completely useless if you don't know how to write melodies for your songs. Watch the video on screen next for a really simple guide to melody.